Good morning and welcome to our MRTA webinar series, our continuation of our educational series that we've started a little over a year ago. My name is John Green with Association Member Benefits Advisors. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping details when we have some folks that are still logging in here. We record every one of these webinars. We place them out onto the MRTA website under their benefits section, so you can go back and reference them in the future. Share them with your family members and things like that, and you can catch up with some of maybe the other webinar series that you missed out beforehand. All participants are in a listen-only mode, and what that means is it's not like the regular Brady Bunch Zoom where you see all these squares all over the board. But if you have a question or you have a comment, you can drop it into chat or put it in the Q&A section, and myself, Gary, and Kel will monitor that. And if there's something that comes up that's specific to you and your situation, we'll probably address that just in back and forth in chat or Q&A to you. But if it's a question that the whole group would benefit from, we may share that and talk about it more in depth. Then at the end of the conversation, what we've been doing lately, and it's been kind of fun, we will stop the recording. And if you feel more comfortable, you can hold up your hand on the reaction bar. We will unmute you and let you ask your question live, and we can stump our panel of experts and talk about that as well. You'll also notice on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see this at the end of our conversation today, a QR code. And this works just like it does in restaurants with the menus these days. You just take your smartphone, open up your camera feature, hover over that QR code. Don't take a picture. A little form will pop up. You can hit your finger on there and ask any questions that you want to as we go forward there. So let's go ahead and jump on in here. I've got a couple of special co-hosts with me today, Gary DeVito and Kel Smalley. They divide the state of Missouri up for Association Member Benefits Advisors. Gary and his team work the eastern part of the state, and Kel and his team work the western part of the state. And if you were with us at the convention just a few weeks ago, you got to see the governor. You got to see a lot of state officials, a lot of things going on out there. But Gary and Kel, I understand you put on quite a show, but tell me your thoughts about the convention. And I'll open it up and let Gary go first and kind of tell me what you thought about that. And we've got Martha and Maria joining us as well. So Gary, why don't you share? And then I'm going to jump over to Martha and Maria and get their thoughts as well.
Sure. Yeah, we thought it was a great convention. The MRTA, we work with associations all across the country, and I've worked with a probably good handful of them. MRTA is by far my favorite association. The folks in the office, including Maria, are awesome to work with. The retired teachers are awesome to work with. Just a great, warm folks and just a lot of fun to work with. And it really was. That was probably the best convention I've ever been to. Had a great time, and look forward to next year. Maybe we could do it again just next month, Maria. I'm not sure. You tell me.
I don't know if our staff would appreciate that, but we did have a good time and we had a great turnout. Our annual meeting was down at the Lake of the Ozarks. One of our guest speakers, as you can see on the screen, actually, we had two of them, which was Governor Parson came in and spoke to our group, as well as Chad Carden talked about our strategic planning. Right now we have a Region VP training meeting here in the office. So I'm with Martha. Martha came in for the Region VP training. And so we just wanted to jump in, give a shout out to John and to the AMBA team. They do a phenomenal job, and we really appreciate the partnership we have with them. It was just a good meeting overall, and I'll let Martha say a few words as well.
I think I talked a little bit about the meeting last time, but yeah, we had a great time. A lot of good feedback from that. We're looking forward to the next one. I'm starting to visit some units, and I'm starting my region meeting visits in October. We'll be all over the state and getting to see places I haven't been and people I haven't met. So I'm very excited about that. And I think it's going to be a great, great year.
Outstanding. Thank you. Before we let you go back to your training, are there any things we're starting to see political ads pop up, voting, things like that? Is there any particular thing that you're watching between now and the elections that we need to let our members know about?
There is. We have the General Assembly is in for special session, and they've come up with some compromise language on the income tax deduction. So there's a surplus of over $800 million in the state of Missouri's coffers. And one of the things that they want to do is use that money, some of it for agricultural tax credits, and then some of it for income tax deductions for earners, and it's on a graduated basis and whatnot. MRTA is extremely concerned about doing this and it being short-sighted. So they're taking a surplus right now. Will they have enough in the coffers when it comes time for future years to fund public education? On the agricultural side of things, we understand that's a huge issue for our family farms, and we support the agricultural tax credits. But we are a little bit concerned about the income tax credits, and we really are urging our General Assembly members to maybe wait and postpone that vote until regular session when we have a better look at our budget. Right now, there was a bill that was passed in the Senate. They went from, initially it was looked at 750, 800 million cut to general revenue for income tax deductions, and they moved that down to 350. So we think that's a pretty good compromise net. It isn't as big as it could have been. So we look at that, but we still urge them to use caution moving forward to make sure that our public education is funded to the level it needs to be funded.
Okay. Anything on the national front from the GPO, WEP? What's going on with that?
Definitely. We were in Washington last week. So our team was able to go out to NRTA, which is the National Retirement Teachers Association. And one of the things we did is we took time to lobby on the Hill. So we talked to Representative Luke DeMeyer, Representative Cleaver's office, and a couple other offices that we got to talk to staff about the importance of weapon GPO and the relief on that. We've got enough sponsors on the House side, so we're looking forward to maybe seeing some changes with that moving forward. I think our biggest concern is we don't want them to put existing active teachers that are in these public pension plans into Social Security in order to pay for the relief on weapon GPO, because that would hurt our retirement system and ultimately hurt our retirees. So again, there's a good balance between the two of those, but I do believe they can come to some kind of relief depending on what reforms they do with Social Security. So that's something that we also are really looking at. It was great to take the team out. Sarah and Paige and Morgan had never had exposure of lobbying on the Hill before. So it was great to have them there. We had one night we ended up, we got done around 7 o'clock. I think it was 7:30, and we took some scooters and went and saw some of the monuments. And so it was a good team building event as well. And just so that you know, I don't know if you saw this morning, the monuments that we were at, we posted those all on Facebook. So I ask you to please join Facebook, be a friend of MRTA. If you follow us on Facebook, our reel constantly updates you as to our activities of staff. That is something different than any other retirement plan that we've seen before do. It's something that we do that's a little bit different. Kind of lets you know what your director's up to and what the staff are up to. And so it gives you a little bit of insight into our daily lives and whatnot. So again, those are the key issues that we're looking at right now, John. And again, AMBA team, Gary and Cal are wonderful to work with. I see them on the road, and we will be seeing them on the road the next month. I feel like they will be my best friends along with Martha by the time we get done our visits.
Absolutely. Thank you, ladies, for carving out a little bit of time for us today to be on the webinar and sharing what's going on, not only in the state, but also nationally that can impact MRTA members. So I'll let you get back to that and enjoy the rest of your meeting today. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Cal. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. All right, Kel, Maria mentioned that you're usually out and about as well and crossing paths with many of the leaders of MRTA. When a local unit wants to have you or Gary out, what's the best way to contact you? What do you do when you come out, when you come to their local units?
Yeah, so best way to contact us is by phone or email, text. The only thing I don't have is a pager. But we love coming out, and we always give an update, like Maria would on what the association's doing, because typically not everyone someone from the MRTA office can make it to a local unit meeting. So we give that update for them. And then also go over, all of the benefits of being an MRTA member. Like, we like to name our favorite. I know Gary has his favorite, but I like to name my favorite MRTA discounts, like Sam's Club, Costco, movie theaters, and all that fun stuff, and how I've used them, and essentially I use those enough each year to pay for multiple MRTA memberships. So give an update on that. And then, we like to talk about what retirees are most interested in. And one that's always at the top of the list is one that you're about to go over. So we go over that in detail and, answer people's questions that they have, and then set up times to review that on a more personalized basis. Everyone thinks that this is kind of a one size fits all, and it's definitely not. When it comes to long-term care, every situation is different, and there's like 400 different combinations of options. But Gary and I and our teams have been doing this for a long time. For me, over 7 years. For Gary, probably longer than I've been alive. But no, seriously. Every situation's different, and it's custom tailored to you. And with the AMBA and MRTA partnerships, the companies that are chosen to represent and ensure you are A-rated and are some of the best and have the best bang for your buck. There's just no doubt about it. So
Absolutely. Thank you, too.
John.
Thank you, too, for joining us. Please, if you're on this call today, you've got questions, Gary and Kel are going to monitor the chat and the Q&A and be able to respond to those. This is a great time. We've got the experts there. I'm going to ask Gary and Kel to put their email addresses and their phone numbers in the chat as well. If you're on the east side, Gary can contact you. West side, Kel can contact you, or you can contact them, vice versa. If you're in the middle, they kind of meet somewhere there, and we'll figure out to get you out to your units and talk as well. But let's go ahead and kind of roll through this conversation today. Real quickly, my name is John Green. I live a little bit north of Houston with my wife, who is an elementary school teacher. She teaches in the same school that she went to, as well as my 3 kids. I've been in the classroom for 30 plus years, helping educators understand what their retirement years look like. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you today. As if you've been with us before, my middle son did his grad work at Mizzou and loved that time up there. And so I appreciate you taking good care of him over the past year or so while he was up there. Just got married, just finished his first year in his accounting position, and loves every minute of it. But just a quick reminder, Maria touched on this to some degree, and just a real quick reminder, MRTA does so many things for you. First and foremost, watching out for your pension, fighting for those cost of living adjustments, helping you to preserve any kind of benefits that you may receive from the state, and then connecting you back to your local community. I think there were over 250 people at the convention a couple of weeks ago. We're seeing the units get back together. What an opportune time to bring friends to MRTA. We've had a lot of retirements in the past couple of years from public education. Time to bring those people into MRTA, and then to connect you with those important discounts that Kel talked about, the free stuff, the fun stuff, the benefits, the best of the best, all that's out there, all wrapped up into one is what MRTA does on your behalf. Just a quick reminder, at Association Member Benefits Advisors, there are some advantages of being with MRTA. We can help fill those gaps that whenever you left the schoolhouse that you maybe didn't take those benefits with you, or gaps that you may have in your benefits now. They're portable for whatever reason that you leave the state. We've got several MRTA members that join us from out of state, and you can take these benefits wherever you want to go. But some of the biggest reasons why MRTA members appreciate having this access is that they can extend the benefits and access to those benefits to their family members. It could be to their parents. It could be to their adult children who may be aged out of their benefits. And because so many teachers retire maybe from the classroom, but don't retire from a second job, with proper planning on your parents or other loved ones, it may prevent you from having to take extended time off that takes away from your income, providing for your household as well. And we're going to kind of talk about this whole concept today of home health and elder care and long-term care. We're going to have the 201 side of the conversation. If you joined us back a couple of weeks ago with our 101 conversation back last week on the 15th, this will be a continuation. If you didn't join us on the 101 conversation, that's okay. We're going to catch you up pretty rapidly. And as Kel mentioned, there's 400 different ways you can take care of this particular situation and have peace of mind in your household. So our goals today, to recap that 101 just real briefly, the basics of long-term care, show you what the current environment is in extended care, not only from the standpoint of what the costs are these days, but what some of the new options are out there for care. and cover some of the myths and the concerns around this. I want to have Gary share an example that he had with Nancy Craig, your past president, talking about how she was able to make sure that what she had in place was proper for her. But more importantly, make the most of your endorsed options. Right now, to help Gary and Kel and I want to launch a poll real quickly. I want to find out how many of us on the call today have some sort of a long-term care plan in place. It doesn't have to necessarily be a true long-term care policy. It could be something, or you could just say, hey, I've got a Folgers can full of money that I buried out in the back of the yard. That's my long-term care plan. Tell us what you've got. Yes, no, not sure. We'll take a few seconds here to complete that task. All right, we've got about 2/3 of you that are in here. We'll give it about 5-6 more seconds and let some more folks jump in to make sure. Okay, we've got 3/4 of us that have participated. I think this will give us a pretty good shot there. One last call, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're going to wrap this up, share the results here. So we've got an interesting mix here. This is a little bit different than we've had in the past. We've got about 60% of you that don't have any type of plan in place, and that's fine. We're going to show you what your options are today. About 1/3 of you do have some type of a plan in place, and I applaud you for that. And then there's some of you that are real honest, probably the most honest. I'm not sure if I've got a plan out there. So we're going to talk about all of those different things, address those common concerns. Again, if you've got questions, if you've got comments, drop them into chat, put them into Q&A, let Gary and Kel and I monitor those and answer those as we go along throughout here, and then we'll have a chance at the end. But this is why I have this conversation. This is why I'm so passionate about this subject of elder care and long-term care. This is a photo of my dad and I back in July of 2020, right when he turned 80. He was in a memory care facility in Austin, Texas. This was the last time that he remembered who I was. And for a man that had ran track collegiately at the University of Oklahoma, played basketball up until his mid-60s, was all-state everything in the state of Texas, to watch him decline because of vascular dementia was heart-wrenching. But because he had prepared many years in advance, it wasn't as difficult as it could have been on my stepmother, my brother, and I, because he did prepare and he had a plan. And so that's why I'm passionate, and I'll filter some of my comments through my experiences with what he experienced, how my stepmother and my brother and I experienced this whole long-term care, elder care situation. And hopefully it will help inform how you make your decisions. To catch you up from a historical perspective, many of you probably purchased a long-term care plan. Those that did, either through your school, through a group plan, or maybe possibly through an individual offering at some time. And back in the early 90s, we started to see this rise in long-term care policies being purchased by individuals. And so all the way up until about the early 2000s, we saw a pretty sizable increase. And then all of a sudden, we started to see the impact of Alzheimer's and people living longer on long-term care. And companies started saying, we can't afford to support this situation. So we have to raise premiums, tighten up the medical guidelines to qualify. And so what happened was we started to see this significant decline. And that brings us to a situation now to where you may have policies or situations that you don't quite know what to do with, or what's my next step. And so a lot of people are paralyzed. And so we want to get over that paralyzation and share with you some good news and some challenging news when it comes to elder care situations. The good news for all of us, advancements in diagnosis and treatment are driving life expectancies up. Even outside of COVID, once you remove COVID, life expectancies are up because we're catching things earlier. We're able to treat it better, and recovery times are better, and they're doing it at home, which is really a neat thing. So a lot of different options are out there for care. It used to be, if you had a certain situation, you had to go to a nursing home facility. Now with the different care options, you could stay at home and get that type of care that you need. So there's a lot more options out there for you. On the flip side, though, as we age, our population continues to grow, the need increases and the cost goes up. And I'm going to show you kind of a unique situation in Missouri here in just a moment. But what I really find is probably the biggest challenge to elder care is that the smaller family care pool is shrinking. And I think about my grandparents. All four of my grandparents were one of 6 to 12 kids. So there was always somebody in the family that could take care of my great grandparents or somebody else. I mean, there were sometimes 20 to 25 years of age range between my grandfather and his oldest sister. So there's always somebody that could take care of somebody, but now we have 2, 3 kids at the most, and that care pool is shrinking. Companies have put in some restrictive policy language, and Medicare has made some changes. We're going to talk briefly about that. So costs have gone up. Some people have said, oh, well, I still want the coverage, but I have to take out a larger elimination period or a deductible. We'll talk briefly about that. And that puts a lot of money out of my pocket up front. And then once things kind of got leveled out, COVID-19 hits. And there were some changes that really impacted nursing homes, that impacted their ability to provide staffing. Something I didn't realize with my father was that many specialists in nursing homes, occupational therapists, physical therapists, program directors, will rotate amongst several different nursing homes. Well, when COVID-19 came in, you couldn't move staff around for fear that you were going to infect multiple populations. So that meant you had to hire new staff, and costs went up. So the cost of care has gone up in a lot of situations. And, that may put us in a situation that is difficult. But what hasn't changed throughout the aging process, life expectancies, COVID-19, all that kind of stuff, is that 70% of us, once we reach age 65, are going to need extended care for some period in our life. That doesn't mean, like my father, the last 2 years of his life. It doesn't mean that necessarily, but it could mean as a result of a fall or an accident or a surgery, you may need 3 to 6 months of care. And so this is all going to touch us somehow, whether it's ourselves, our parents, our loved ones. It's going to touch us at some point. Now, to recap, in Missouri, you've got an interesting situation. It's very similar to Texas in that overall costs are fairly low for long-term care at different levels, whether it's home health aid, assisted living facility, or in semi-private or private room. But the impact of inflation is really driving up the cost in the major metropolitan areas. And you see that in Kansas City, especially on the east side in St. Louis, where home health aid costs are going up dramatically. We're not seeing it so much in Jeff City and Columbia. It may be more pronounced in the more rural areas because gas prices are up and it's harder to find help, that type of thing. So you see these positive numbers in red. That's the inflation change for that level of coverage just in the past year. So I'd encourage you to write down genworth.com, GENWRTH.com. Write that down, go out to that website, plug in your zip code, your city, play with their tool out there that shows you what it would cost for a home health aide to come out to your home, assisted living for a 1-bedroom single occupancy or a semi-private or private room in a nursing home. See what it looks like now. You can project costs. So it's a pretty fun tool to go out and look at. When I say fun for us insurance nerds, it can be fun, but it's an interesting tool. It helps you understand, especially for those of you who have a plan in place right now, will my plan cover what I may need in 5 or 10 years? So take a look at that, but we are seeing costs across the country go up. For those of you who are not residing in Missouri, that have chosen to move closer to grandkids, move to the south, get out of the cold weather, whatever you want to call it, just know that in Arizona, Florida, costs are going up more pronounced more quickly. Other parts of the Midwest, especially once you get up into Wisconsin, Illinois, those places, those costs are going up even more, and their costs are quite a bit more. So in Missouri, the costs are pretty in line with the national average, slightly less in the rural areas. So catch you up on that. We covered in 101 the components of a basic long-term care policy. And for the third of you on the call that have a long-term care policy, most of your plans have these components in there. For those of you who don't have a plan, to qualify to receive benefits if you have a long-term care plan, you have to lose activities of daily living, usually 2 or 3 of those, or a cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's or dementia. Once you trigger your benefits, you have a daily benefit amount or a pool of money that says we are going to send you $300, or you have a pool of X number of thousands of dollars to pull from. That length of coverage means that you've got coverage for X period of years or until your money runs out. The elimination period is the amount you have to pay out of your pocket. And then we talk about location of coverage, whether you get non-skilled services, just like a home health aide that comes out and changes the sheets and does some light housekeeping stuff like that. And then the impact of inflation protection. So we're going to kind of touch on those a little bit, show you some modernized options and some alternatives that are out there, and encourage you to get a review of your existing policy. So here's where a lot of people find themselves now, and especially for the third of you on this call. And we've had, I can't tell you how many emails I received after we did 101 that said, I have a plan. It was through XYZ company and they've made changes. What do I do? What we're seeing out there right now, especially for those of you who may have purchased a plan through the school, through a group plan provider like Genworth, which is one of the largest providers of group long-term care insurance, you're starting to see some periodic rate increases. Some of them can be a little sizable. And so the company will send a letter out that says, we're taking this rate increase of 30% or whatever, but if you want to level your premium out, we can reduce your coverage. Well, that sounds great because you're going to save money or you're going to stabilize your premium, but you may be cutting valuable coverage that you need in the future. Some people we find that they say, well, my parents went through this, but they had an elimination period that was 90 to 180 days. And we had to come up with $30,000 to $50,000 before mom could be taken care of. That puts a financial strain on there. And then you're looking at it and saying, this doesn't meet what my needs are now or in the future. So, the policy plan hasn't kept up with that. And then there are some policy options that people were sharing with us and they say, I missed some options that the company sent out to me. They sent me letters saying I could increase my coverage. Do I have any options? That type of thing. Some older policies were very restrictive on home care, or they had less coverage for home care, and you're just now realizing that. And so people aren't able to get the care where they want to. And this is why I highly, highly, highly encourage you, if you have a plan, to go ahead and get a review and make sure that you have somebody that can look over that, and Kelly and Gary can do that for you. When you're considering a review of an existing plan, or if you don't have a plan and you're thinking about it, I want you to consider what the current realities are in long-term care. We've done some research through government numbers, through some of our carriers, and they've kind of given us an average. And they say the average time that someone spends in an assisted living facility, now this is kind of one of those interim places where you have your own apartment, you participate in the meals and the activities. And then if you need somebody to come in and do some light housekeeping, maybe give you some medication, things like that, the average time that you spend in that's about 28 months. But almost 60% of people who start in an assisted living facility, they will move into a skilled nursing facility sometime in their life. Now, the average stay in a nursing home is 2.2 years. For my dad, it was a little less than 2 years. Men tend to spend on average about 8 months in a nursing home facility. Women will spend about 2.5 years. So think about your situation. What could that be? But if you've got a history of Alzheimer's, and I noticed this with my father's first facility that he stayed in, the longest, there were people that had been there 5, 6, 7 years because of Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's is such a different disease. It really doesn't affect the body like dementia does. It just affects the mind. And so people can live a long time. So if you've got a history of Alzheimer's, you might want to consider, how does my plan work? That type of thing. But the one thing that jumped out to me big on these stats is that almost 50% of all nursing home resident stays are less than 100 days. And that is not because they pass away within the first 100 days. It is usually because that's when Medicare stops paying for any skilled care after 100 days, or Medicare has determined that they're not going to get any better and they move to chronic care. At that point, Medicare stops paying as well. So people have to realize, I have on my hands a situation to where I can't afford to pay for the nursing facility. I have to move back home. I'm going to show you a little bit later the impact of moving back home, and somebody coming to take care of you, what that can have on a family member. So as you're thinking about your long-term care situation, your plan, if you have a plan, keep these stats in mind because it may inform how you want to plan going forward. And Kel touched on this a little bit earlier. There are other options that are out there these days. There are, as Kel mentioned, probably 400 combinations. So even if you have a plan, and I highly encourage you to have a review on that plan. I'm going to ask Gary a little bit about how that works here in a moment. If you have a plan, I encourage you to get it reviewed to make sure that you've got some of the things we're going to talk about covered properly. But we can talk about the daily benefit amount, the length of coverage, that elimination period, and even non-skilled services and where you're taken care of. Because it doesn't make any sense to me. You served our kids for your entire career, to work all your career and have someone else tell you how you're going to live your retirement years. And so we want to jump in and kind of share some of these options as you go through that. And some of these options have changed since we even started this conversation. With this daily benefit and length of coverage amount, many of the old policies that you may have taken out, especially through a group situation, may have had $100 a day. My father's policy, when we first took it out, was $100 a day, meaning that if he had to go to a nursing home, had to have home health care come in, they would send a check to it for $100 a day to my stepmother or to the nursing home. Fortunately, he had inflation protection on there and it grew. Some of you may not have that, but now there are plans that you can get weekly benefit options, now up to $400 a day in coverage. So there's a pretty good size increase available out there for daily benefit options. You can get length of coverage that starts at 13 weeks. So if you just think, I want to cover maybe after an accident or after a major surgery or something like that, you can get certain shorter periods of coverage up to a year of time. So you can get even a shorter overall. Maybe you have a long-term care plan, but you want to get more coverage that first year. And some of the plans even have a benefit that, say you have a fall or a hip replacement or something, then you have coverage for your recovery. Once you recover, next year you have another surgery, another fall, something like that, then you can get back in there and you can have coverage again. There's certain lifetime benefit maximums, but they do have options there. Okay. Pam, you asked about sending the PowerPoint out. I can send you a recording of this webinar. That way you can walk through it at your leisure at any time. And then Gary or Kel or any of his individuals on their team could cover some of these slides with you individually as well, because we change these slides periodically with new numbers, new stats, things like that. But we do record this. So there are options that can cover more daily benefit amount if you need it, if you've got an old policy that's locked in with a certain amount, and can change the length of coverage. Now, this whole concept of elimination period, if you weren't with us in the 101 session, we likened the elimination period to a deductible on your homeowner's insurance. And those of you in Missouri, you're familiar with Tornado Alley, and you know that tornadoes roll through. Homeowners insurance can cover you for those hail damage, but you may have to pay a deductible, $1,000 or 1% out of your pocket. The way the elimination period works with a long-term care plan, it can be 30, 60, 90, 180 days where you have to pay for that expense yourself before that policy kicks in. The longer that elimination period, the less expensive the long-term care policy is. But then you find out that first dollar is really hard because you've got to find out, where am I going to find $15,000, $20,000 to pay for the first 2 or 3 months of care for my mother, for myself, something like that. There are some plans that can cover that elimination period, 0-day wait, other plans that can go 20 to 100 days, that type of thing. The whole idea being that you're not having to change somebody else's lifestyle because you're tapping into your nest egg, you're having to sell a family asset or something like that, because we know you can't call the pension board and ask for more money if you have a long-term care need. So we can handle that elimination period. But what if I don't want to go to a nursing home? We tried to keep my father at home as long as possible. He was still able to do for himself as much as he could. My stepmother still worked, and he got to the point to where he was at risk to himself of falling, wandering off, or some nights he would get up in the middle of the night and magically try to be an electrician. And he was not trained to be an electrician. And so it got to the point to where we could no longer safely keep him at home. But during that interim time, before we had to move him to a nursing home facility, we were able to have a non-skilled individual, meaning they weren't a true licensed vocational nurse or home health aide, but they could come stay up at night to make sure my father didn't wander off. And so you want to be taken care of where you're most comfortable. There are plans that allow you to stay at home if that's most comfortable to you, or transition as your care needs provide it. Some are lump sum plans that give you 100% of the choice. They just say, you've lost these activities of daily living, there's been a diagnosis, whatever's happened, boom, here's money. Decide how you want to be taken care of. Some provide for skilled or non-skilled home care, meaning you can have somebody come in, cook, clean, change your clothes, feed you, things like that. Sometimes you have to have a home health aide, something of that. Some even give you extra cash if you have to go back to the hospital or emergency room visit. So we've got options that you have out there for location, again, where you want to be taken care of, and these non-skilled services that allow you to have those comfort care that you need by somebody that may be familiar to you. It gives you that money that you can do that and doesn't impact somebody overall. Because the big reason we say this is that ultimately almost 3/4 of all care is provided in a home by a non-skilled or informal caregiver who receives no compensation. And I want you to picture this in your mind. You're a retired educator. Your daughter is now teaching in the schools. You have a long-term care need. Your daughter has to decide, do I quit my job and stunt my pension, stunt the income that comes in to take care of mom? I love mom. I want to take care of her, but how am I going to raise my family and take care of my mom? It puts a lot of strain on families. That care in the home by an informal caregiver who has to quit their job. It really falls, unfortunately, mostly on women. They have to take care of their parents or their in-laws. And you can talk about straining on a marriage, just having to take care of an in-law, move somebody in, something like that. You can see it can really stunt their income. And for those of you who are on a pension, especially for your children who are teachers, you cut several years off their pension, it could really impact them in the long run. And not only is it financial, it's really emotional as well. And we're seeing this quite a bit, especially in churches these days, having to have caregiver support groups that are out there because it drives a lot of stress. And the average Gen X caregiver, that's mine and Gary's age, not Kel's age, but the average Gen X caregiver spends about 22 hours a week taking care of a family member. And it puts a lot of stress emotionally and financially on them because they have to do that. So, having that peace of mind that how you're going to be taken care of, and then it's not going to affect your children and your grandchildren, can be a really big peace of mind for you and for your family. The last conversation that you want to have is when you're sitting around at Thanksgiving with your brothers, sisters, your in-laws, sister-in-laws, brother-in-laws, and saying, hey, mom can't stay by herself anymore. Who's going to take her this week? Who's going to do this? Who's going to take that situation? That's an uncomfortable conversation to have. It's better to have it before the need, but if you've got a proper plan, you don't have to worry about that as much. So we see some common concerns out here. We see people say, well, I'm too old to get long-term care. There are plans up to age 89, depending on what you're looking for, what's available out there to you. Some folks say, I've got health issues. I couldn't qualify for long-term care in the past. Some of these plans that Gary and Kel have mentioned have less restrictive qualifications, not as many medical checks, things like that. And the biggie that we see a lot of times is, I have a long-term care policy and my premiums keep climbing. You're going to hear this from me. It's on recording. You're going to see Kel and Gary nod their head. If you have a plan, do not cancel that plan. Let us review it. You may have options around it, outside of it. You may have policy provisions inside your policy that you're not aware of. Now, I'm going to ask Gary to unmute his line here. And last year, might have been convention last year, whatever it was last year, Nancy Craig, your past president, said she was on this call with me. She would host these and she'd say, I have a long-term care plan. but I'm not sure what it does. Does it do what I need it to do? And she went to Gary, and Gary, what does that review process look like? And did you find anything with Nancy's plan that she needed to be concerned about?
Sure, and actually one of the concerns that Nancy had at that point too was that there were some proposed price increases, as we've seen with policies that have been around for a while. So we reviewed that. We looked at the the inner workings of the policy, and I explained to her. And what we find is that most folks that get these policies, they kind of get them set and put them away. They collect a lot of dust, and people forget what it is that they have. So that's part of what we do, is to just kind of re-educate you on what the plan does cover, what it doesn't cover, let you know if there's gaps, if there's not gaps, if there's too much coverage. We want to look at it from your standpoint. And with Nancy, what we did is took a look at it. She was given some options where she could change the benefits and keep the premiums closer to where they were previous to the increases. So we looked at the different options, and I explained to her what the impact was of those different options and the potential changes, and advise her on how I would handle it. And again, she handles it the way she wants to, but she agreed with it. And again, I can tell you that I've reviewed hundreds, literally, if not probably somewhere in the thousands of policies over the years. And I did start this a long time ago because of experiences that I had with my grandmother, my mother, and my in-laws. So it is something that I've lived through and definitely passionate about. But what we do is just give you an objective set of eyes to take a look at it from an experienced set of eyes also, and let you know what, again, you do have, what you don't have. If there's gaps, we want you to be aware of the gaps. And if there's a way to fill those gaps, we might let you know how to do that. Again, in the end, it's up to you what you do with it. We just want you to be aware of how it works. So it's a process. Sometimes we call the insurance company with you to get the specifics if the policy can't be found. So there's always a way to find out what the details are, because sometimes there's inflation protection. So we want to make sure we're up to date on what the current benefits are. And like John was mentioning, if you have a policy and you're experiencing price increases, do not cancel it. There's probably options. Get an objective set of eyes to look at it with you and find out what your alternatives are.
Exactly. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that very much. Kel, we had another question come in for those that are joining us from out of state. You want to answer that question?
Yeah, sure, Melody. I saw that. So you live in Texas now. That's awesome. I hope you're about to enjoy the cooler weather coming your way. But yeah, I'm happy to help you. Just email me your contact information, and we can set up a time to review that. My contact information is in the chat, the main chat, which should be on the right side of your screen. So just shoot me an email, or you can wait till the end, and I'm sure John will have a link or a QR code that you can use as well, and we'll get you taken care of.
Exactly. We have a lot of folks that join us from out of state. Because this is a licensing issue, Kel and Gary are licensed in multiple states. Some of their team are. If not, we have a representative that can take care of you somewhere. We'll make sure that you're taken care of, that you don't have to worry about that situation whatsoever. Okay. Janet asked, how and where do you look for a policy? Janet, I'm going to assume that you're saying that you don't have a policy yet. I'm going to show you how to start to look for one. If you do have a policy, but you're not sure where it is, we have some ways that we can, that Gary and Kel can try to track some of those down, maybe go back to some school records, things like that. There are a few carriers that we can contact and call as well. So, but dust those things off. Let's look at the provisions, as Gary mentioned, an objective set of eyes to show you where your possible bugaboos or pitfalls could be, or some benefits you may not realize that you have. And so many policies in the past were sold with this inflation rider, or this inflation protection, that would give you options every couple of years to increase your coverage. And sometimes some people forget about those options, and that may affect some of the provisions. So let's make sure that you don't miss anything as you go throughout there. People have asked us about, what about short-term events? Situations to where, like, I have a knee replacement or I have a fall and it takes me about 3 to 6 months or 3 months, 4 to 6 weeks to recover. Does any type of plan out there for that? There are some plans that can help you in a short-term situation. Sometimes they're a little bit, not to say restricted, but they require a physical therapist or some type of home health aide that's skilled. And then you get a lump sum of money that can come out for you that way as well. Some people will use this type of a policy to cover shorter periods of time before a long-term care policy kicks in, but it does give you some flexibility if you have surgeries, falls, things of that nature. There are some things like that. Now we talk about how you pay for this. And unfortunately, as we mentioned before, 70% of us are going to experience a need of care sometime in our life once we reach age 65. Most people will pull assistance from family and friends, or they will have to use personal assets. That could mean cracking an old 403B that you've got saved up for, an IRA, maybe incurring some tax penalties you weren't prepared for. In more rural states like Texas and Missouri, it may mean having to sell family land or something like that that you were intended to pass on. Some people will talk about entering the Medicaid program. I'm going to touch real briefly on that. And then there is this extended care coverage option. If you're interested in that, there's the QR code. We're going to have that there at the end, and we'll walk through that as well and answer some questions as we go forward here. Let's talk about Medicaid real briefly, because there's this misconception, and we hear it at church, we hear it at coffee shops, wherever you hear it. Medicaid will pay for your long-term care, your nursing home. Don't worry about that. Medicaid take care of you, yah. Medicaid is extremely difficult to qualify for. It usually requires that you pay down all of your assets, hide them somewhere. Medicaid is going to look back 5 years and see if you tried to do that for mom by transferring assets and all that. Most educators who have a pension will not qualify for Medicaid because your income's too high. Some people will try to set up a Miller's Trust, which is an irrevocable trust where you have to put all your assets, you don't control it, that type of thing. Again, most pensions don't allow you to qualify for that. And then even if you do qualify for Medicaid and you go into a Medicaid facility, the state of Missouri will try to come back against your estate once you pass away. So Medicaid is not the route to go. I would not encourage you to think that that's what you're going to do. And why would you want to work all your life to then have to spend all your money, throw it all away, because you may have somebody else you have to take care of as well. My good buddy, Dave Ramsey, and I'm taking a Dave Ramsey class with my son and daughter-in-law at church. I was listening to him and heard a stat. Somebody called in and said, what about long-term care? He says, can I self-insure from a long-term care standpoint? Well, if you're like Gary and you've got $4 million net worth, you can afford to self-insure for your long-term care needs. If you're not like Gary, you're like Kel and I, and we don't have a $4 million net worth, then long-term care is a solid option for you to protect your assets. And here's what Dave says about this. And I really like what Dave says about long-term care. A good plan, whatever way you construct your plan, keeps you from having to dip into your pension and your retirement funds to pay for it. That's not a good plan because you got to still run your household. There may be somebody else, your spouse, dependent upon you. It allows you to stay in your home longer. We kept my dad at home as long as possible until we could no longer provide the care that he needed. A good plan allowed my stepmother to continue to work. He was taken care of. She could go visit him every night, have dinner with him, tuck him in, and drive back home. It didn't become a financial burden to where she had to quit her job. My brother or I had to move over to Austin to take care of him, that type of thing. You're not a burden on family and friends. And you can go into your retirement years with a plan. You know what your plan's going to be, and you have taken that off the table and not have to worry about it. So, take it from Dave. He has some pretty good stuff there. Now, there are some other unique ways that you can pay for long-term care. These are not always common, but there are ways that you may not have thought about and ways that you may already have covered that you didn't know you had it. One of these is through the use of life insurance. There are some newer policies, life insurance policies, that have a provision in them that say, if you become terminally ill or if you're confined to a nursing home, you can accelerate some of the face amount to use for your long-term care. Usually it's half of the face amount up to a certain amount. So in the case of the example, Say you have a $200,000 life insurance policy and you have to have confinement in a nursing home. You can use up to $100,000 of that towards your nursing home care. Once you pass away, your beneficiaries will receive the other half. The one thing to point out, it is very restrictive. Usually this language is just for a nursing home, not assisted living, not home health care, just for a nursing home. So that could be an option there. Another option is an MRTA endorsed tax deferred asset protection plan. It allows you to take some of your nest egg money, set it aside. You don't have to worry about opening up the stock market and seeing all the red that's taking place and losing any money in that account. It only can rise if your stock market goes up. You don't lose any money, but it gives you the ability to use money for long-term care, take money out as you need it, or depending upon if you're already taking money out and you have to have long-term care, it can double your payments that come out. So unlike your pension plan where you can't call the pension board and say, double my payment, you can use this plan to double your payment. And this is a situation that I've done because of my family history of dementia. I don't qualify for long-term care. So I was able to take an old nest egg, an old pension plan that I had from a previous company and use this for my long-term care. If I don't need long-term care, that's great. I've got this money that I can use for whatever I want to do. But if I need it, I know my wife and myself are protected. So those are some strategies that are out there. Some of you will have required minimum distributions from an old IRA, from a 403B, something like that. Depending upon your age, you may already have taken those required minimum distributions. If not, some people will use those required minimum distributions, those RMDs. They will use that money to pay for some type of a long-term care plan and cover it that way. If you have a health savings account, maybe you took it from the school whenever you retired, maybe your spouse has a health savings account. This is where you have pre-tax money that you can use for your health expenses. The federal government thinks so highly of having long-term care plan in place. They allow you to use your health savings account money, which is pre-tax money, to purchase long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance, you can use pre-tax money, so you're already getting a pretty good sized discount off of it. Then any benefits that you receive are tax-free as well. So that's another option. And then kind of another, I don't want to say it's a great option, but if you've got some health conditions that would prevent you from qualifying from long-term care, some people will use a large lump sum cancer, heart attack, and stroke policy to use $40,000, $50,000 towards their care. So those are some other unique options that are out there. Kel and Gary, before we move forward, have we had any questions that have popped up that we need to address out there?
There was one from Howard. I think I answered it in the Q&A section, but I guess technology might not be my best suit for sure, because all of a sudden it's gone. But his question was, who other than the Genworth salesman that sold the long-term care policy could review the policy? And I tried to answer back, and hopefully you did get this, Howard, but we can review those policies. And in fact, Nancy Craig's policy, I'm pretty sure was, if memory serves me right, was a Genworth policy. But really doesn't matter who the carrier is, because for the most part, any post 1996 long-term care policy should be structured in such a way that it follows the law. So we can review any of those.
Exactly. And that Genworth situation is very common. We had it down here in Texas. They were the plan that was offered by the teachers retirement service there in Texas, and they stopped offering it. They still service the claims, but they started taking rate increases, changing coverage. Genworth is very common. So I highly encourage you, let Kel or Gary review that policy, see what your options are, because you have some options in that policy out there as well. All right, before we answer some more questions, just want to run through a couple of things. October is Medicare month. You're going to start to see your TV, if you haven't already, light up with Joe Namath, Jimmy J.J. Walker, and others just screaming at you about Medicare, Medicare Advantage, all this kind of stuff like that. On the 6th and the 20th, we're going to have two identical webinars. Kel's going to host the one on the 6th. I'm going to host the one on the 20th. We're going to answer all of your soup to nuts, alphabet soup questions about Medicare. For those of you who aren't yet eligible, those of you who are already on Medicare, we're going to talk about all that alphabet soup, the differences between a supplement plan and advantage plan, what you have to do, what you should do, and then we're going to show you what Medicare does and doesn't cover. So sign up for those things. Go out and look on the MRTA website. Watch out for the emails, all that kind of stuff. You can jump in and participate that way. Please, please, please tell your former coworkers, tell any retired teachers. We had a lot of them the past couple of years about these MRTA webinars. This is a great way to introduce them to your association, help them join the association, strengthen your pension, get COLAs, get WEP, GPO overturned, all that kind of stuff. Again, let them know about these series here. So I'm going to wrap up the conversation. And Kel or Gary, is there anything we missed in talking about long-term care from your perspective, Kel?
Yeah, I'll say, when you think about long-term care, imagine yourself, in a room with 100 people, and if 70% of that room, imagine you're all standing up, 70% sits down, right? Well, all of those people sitting down are going to need some type of home health care, assisted living, or facility care. And the 30% standing up, get to walk out, right? So, there's a 6% chance you'll use your home insurance, a 1% chance your house is going to burn down. That's very unlikely, right? But we're talking about a 70% chance that you're going to get older, your health is going to decline, and you're just going to need some extra help. And I just had a meeting this morning with a couple. He's a bigger guy like me, 6'1", 240. My wife cannot, move me around. And someday when I'm older and I can't move, there's no way she's going to be able to take care of me, So they wanted to stay at home. They didn't want to go to a facility. Okay, well, we have options for that, right? So, we're going to see if they can get qualified, because you do have to see if you can get medically qualified for one of these policies, see if they can get qualified for that. And, they're each going to have about $40,000 that'll pay cash for them to help them stay in their home, and they can use that however they want. So, if you haven't thought about that process, and, it's just something that you don't want to think about, but you need to, because it's also not realistic for your kids to quit their jobs and take care of you full time either.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
it's something you don't want to think about, but it's just a reality. We're all going to get older.
Right.
Yeah. And those are all excellent points. And to kind of piggyback on that, a lot of times we think, well, I could wait another year or 2 or 5 years. We would encourage you to look at it as soon as you can, because the younger you do it, the better health you are, the less expensive it's going to be, the better chance you can qualify. And, a lot of folks believe, well, if I wait, 4 or 5 years and I stay in good health, I can still get qualified. And that's probably true. But what I will tell you is that it will cost more because you are older. And yeah, you may pay less years, but on a cumulative basis, the insurance companies have it figured out. You'll end up paying more on a cumulative basis by waiting.
Exactly. So if you're on the call today and you have questions, again,